Hey, everybody. Welcome from high atop the 1616 Camden Tower studios. We've got Adam Blitzman and myself, and for some reason your camera is not on, but we're in the same room and we're trying to avoid the echo. It's been an interesting morning already. So we are going to go deep into profit and loss and the impact. There we go. We got Adam back here. This is awesome. On helping you recession-proof your business. It's been a recurring theme. I don't know that we would run out of stuff to talk about because of what's going on out there and things that we can do inside your own company. So that'll be good. And I know, Jack, you've got some Cliff Clavin notes and rants that'll be good too. For anybody that, you know the drill. I doubt that we have anybody new on here, but in case we do, use the Q&A to hit us up with questions, and anything's fair game. And if you want to harass us on the chat, you can do that too. All right. So Jack, before we unleash the beast of Adam Boatsman, he is back from Costa Rica. He's got the tan and he's been surfing and he avoided sharks and all that. It's great to have him back. And he's going to go deep on profit and loss. But what do you got for us, Jack? By the way, you're color coordinated with the orange shirt and all of our orange backgrounds. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. And sort of the orange, I think it's called orange burnt of our underneath our logo too. So we're just like, you know, we're fashionistas today.
Yeah, right on.
Fantastic. All right. So first, if you have been dying to put your 15-year-old teenager to work and not being able to because they are not 16 yet, there is hope for you. So there is a bill in the North Carolina General Assembly that, and this is targeted towards the hospitality industry, but the quote is, could 15-year-olds be the solution to labor shortages in the hospitality industry? Current law says that only people age 16 and older can work inside establishments that serve alcohol, but it would lower the age to 15. Basically, and even 16-year-olds can't serve alcohol. They just can work in a bar, but not serve the alcohol. You have to be 18 well, actually you have to be 21, I think. You can work between 16 and 21 in a bar, but you just can't serve alcohol. They want to lower it. So now your 18-year-olds can serve alcohol to 21-year-olds or their friends, as it may be. So that was kidding.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, I know. I say that and have two teenagers that are right in that sweet spot that are potentially doing things they shouldn't be doing. But my kids wouldn't do that, would they?
Never.
So, yeah, of course. And then we talked about independent contractors last week, and there's this push to try to have this rule. And as we talked about, there's rules with respect to labor. There are labor regulations, but then there are also IRS regulations really dealing with tax, et cetera. And so they're trying to unify those two worlds. But the problem is that according to this article, employers and independent contractors were not asking for clarification. So it's the unions that are basically saying, hey, we want to decipher this and have a clear rule. But it really doesn't impact the unions directly. So it's kind of like people butting in other people's business. So those are really kind of the two bits of information, random information for your world today.
Wow, both of those are interesting. Definitely impact business. Isn't that interesting? People butting in other people's business. It's a human condition, I think. Dang. Adam, I think you're teed up, man.
And nice shirt, go heels.
So you're good.
Yeah, I know, but the problem is I think that it's not going to switch over to my camera. So I'm going to come sit next to you.
All right, that's cool.
Yeah, so we're going to go this way. Anyway, yeah, so we're still logistically challenged on how we're going to pull this off, but we're in the same office, so it seems kind of stupid to not.
But you're wearing an awesome shirt, so it's all is forgiven.
Hey, by the way. Wait.
Oh, no way.
Navy blue shoes too. So I'm
nice.
He is into it.
I didn't go there, but since they're getting my money, I figured I had at least wear the swag associated with it. But anyway, yeah, the only thing that I had that's going to be, still germane to the topic of recession-proof your business is, again, you're starting to see the articles come out about reduction in hiring targets for larger companies, and then, in effect, some layoffs at some companies. So, it may be one of those self-fulfilling prophecies is going to be pretty hard anyway, or pretty tight anyway, in terms of, raising inflation. So Gary doesn't spend as much money. That slows the economy down. 2 quarters in a row, you're in a recession of negative growth. There we go. But I think the one article that I read, it was in the Wall Street Journal, that jumped out at me that, I think is relevant for this audience. At the same time, it's not like I'm like, yeah, about time. But the article was effectively younger workers in shock because the pendulum's about to switch to it being an employer's market. So I'm only saying that to say that, I think a lot of us as employers have been sort of living in a labor shortage fear mentality for a while. And, A, you should still treat your people right. B, do what's in the best interest of your business and your people, because there is no business without the people. But at the same time, living in fear that you feel like you're going to have to be hostage, maybe that's getting a little bit better. So Jack's, when that new crop of attorneys comes out, a shoemaker, Jack isn't going to have to put in the offer letter, the trip to Disney World, and then the rides on his boat, up the lake, and, barbecue. It's just going to be kind of look a lot like the same offer that he had in 2019, but maybe with a few other remote working options. So, because I think a lot of the stuff that's here was actually for a good. I mean, the ability to work anywhere was good. I mean, us all wearing a suit and tie, that was dumb. So no offense if you were, but it was silly. So, I think that's all good. But I think some of the stuff that got crazy, there's going to be less. I think there's going to be less crazy and less of a fear that if you don't do the crazy, that you're doomed. So that's a positive, I think. But that's what the pundits are saying anyway, is that labor shortage going to get a little bit better, which kind of echoes Jack's theme in terms of living it, feeling like you're a hostage. That's probably going to get a little bit better too. But what I'd also encourage everybody is don't go off the freaking deep end with that thought.
So you mentioned a trigger term, evidently fashion. You talk about suits and ties and stuff like that. So Derek, thank you for harassing us on the chat. Will these fashion tips be sent out as an email after the call? No, you have to be live to get this one. So bottom line is be yourself, be who you are, be comfortable. And that's why we've moved to t-shirts and shorts. And Jack, you haven't been wearing a suit for a while.
I haven't, at least to work. Occasionally a sports coat. I'm actually wearing jeans today. It still feels a little awkward coming into the office with jeans. Haven't switched to shorts yet. Not ready for my coworkers to see all of that. So
Gary's going to have to get you a set of hip jeans so we can get rid of those dad jeans you've been wearing.
Yeah, cargo jeans, cargo shorts not in anymore. I don't know.
They're actually coming back.
I still
Are they?
have mine, and I like them. I like all those pockets.
I like them too. I use them to work out in the yard. So I'm only embarrassing my family and not, in our neighborhood. So
They're coming back, man.
yeah, good. I kept them. See, now I got to tell my wife, see, there was a reason why I kept them. So, but yeah, it's, I agree with that. I think don't go over the deep end. I think that the expectations of workers, especially younger workers, are still a little bit different, like maybe expecting accommodations to be able to work maybe at home. But I think what we're seeing is well, it was as expected as the ripple effect of what happens when you're not in the office together and there's not collaboration. I was recently in some office space where they moved from uptown to South End, near to where you guys are, and the space was built for collaboration, but different types of collaboration. There's also quiet spaces. They had all of their owners on the interior. So, no privilege of office windows. So I think there's a change in mentality and a desire to bring back, I shouldn't say groupthink because that kind of has a negative connotation, but collaboration in person. And whether it is, having coffee, having donuts, whatever it may be, but being in the same room and having an open-ended discussion. And part of that is, I think some of us believe we can multitask. I know a few people who can truly do it, but our brains are not wired for that. We think we're multitasking, but all we're doing is switching between things in a very linear fashion and just switching very quickly between the two. But as soon as we see a squirrel, all our minds are geared towards, okay, go follow the squirrel for even just for a nanosecond. So anyway, I think there needs to be continue to be accommodations, but I think it's a different kind of mindset, which is more bringing back more in-person collaboration.
So mindset leads us into stuff. Go back a couple years to March 2020, when what does this mean? Lockdown, all that kind of stuff. And think about what you did as a business owner. Think about what you should have done. Think about those that did it well by having kind of battle plans drawn up already. They didn't get caught flat-footed, versus those who kept thinking, well, in 2 weeks it'll pass and then we'll be past it. And so I know that we did daily stand-ups with the leadership team. We had contingency plans that were drawn up from cash flow standpoint, et cetera. And we were prepared to do what we needed to do. Some of you guys had to do it. Some of you didn't do it. But think about that. So let's talk about some of those levers, Adam, from a P&L standpoint of just tightening up the ship in case the storms hit.
Sure, yeah. Can you bring up the sheet again? Did you bring up the
Uh,
sheet the last time? I can't remember.
let me see. Let me see what I can do on that. That may take me a while.
Yeah, so while Gary's doing the hunt and peck for the document that I'm going to be speaking from, it's the checklist that we shared, a couple webinars ago. It's also sitting in the vault for those of you guys that have access to the vault. 2 weeks ago, we talked about balance sheet moves to make to strengthen up your balance sheet. If you're about to experience potentially a downturn, this week we're going to go more into the profit and loss statement, which is really where you're going to generate probably the bulk of your cash flow. And I guess what I would say, about this is that it really, anything that I'm going to talk about are really things that you ought to be doing anyway, versus, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do that because I'm doing just fine. I mean, these are things that you really should be doing, annually, if not more often, anyway, just to make sure that you're, like the worst case scenario is you expend some energy on your part in terms of, doing a good, thorough review of your P&L and making some changes. And I know it's horrible. Like the thing that could actually happen from that is that you increase your company value and boost your cash flow, which is probably going to boost the money that you're putting in your pocket. So you definitely should not do these things if you don't want those two things, which is your company to be more valuable and for you to put more cash in your pocket. If that's not what you're after, you can tune me out for the rest of the webinar. But if that is what you're after, then, a lot of this stuff is just good old fashioned, common sense things that you should be considering doing anyway. And that was a long enough intro that I think Gary's got it up.
That worked.
There
Thank
he
you.
goes. Yeah. There he goes. All right. So you want to scroll down to the profitability section?
Yeah.
Come on.
Here we go.
All right.
P&L.
Yeah, so I think it'll all fit on a page. So maybe we'll be, Gary and I have barbecue waiting. So that's our motivation to wrap early. But, the first item that you need to look at, the first couple are actually more on the sales side of the equation. So, the biggest thing that's going to bite you in the butt during, a potential recession is a slowdown in sales. So slowdown in sales happens, and then you don't make the associated P&L cuts, that you really ought to be making. And next thing you know, you're starting the doom spiral going down. So how do you fix that? You really look at, well, how can I really shore up my sales? Well, item number one on the list is to the extent that you can control this, go to your major customers and say, look, supply chain's been tough, everything's kind of tough. I know that you've got your own concerns, but if I can get some visibility into you locking in what you think you're going to buy from me, then I'm willing to make that worth your time. Visibility for me, I'll figure out how to make up the discount I'm about to give you, but the ability to lock in something that I can kind of count on, is going to give me the ability to make some moves on my end to help you out, on your end, Mr. Customer. So, the first thing that you're going to want to do is just really look at the customer base and look at who can you start to lock in terms of longer term contracts. And if you don't have any long-term contracts, you're like, that's great advice, Adam, but I don't have any long-term contracts. Well, how could you get some? Think this is your opportunity to sort of blue sky, think outside of the box. Can I get people to start committing to some type of spend level, even if it's not a commitment? I'll ask Jack in a second to kind of chime into, how legally binding is a PO, which is probably the more, or a purchase contract, so that's your 5-second notice, Jack, that you're going to be up in a second. But, you're really looking for something other than, we're sitting around as management. Well, what can we count on from Gary? I don't know. Gary's always increased his order by 5%. So let's lock that in and count on it. Well, for all I know, Gary's having meetings over his shop saying, damn guys, we're looking down, we're going to have to start squeezing price, or we're going to have to start making some cutbacks on what we buy from Adam. Let's start executing on that strategy. The point is, I need to take a little bit more control of my own destiny. I can't control what Gary's going to do, but what I can control is at least calling Gary and saying, hey dude, we've all been listening to the news. What are you looking like next year? And you've historically done 5%, what do I got to do to at least keep that flat? Happy to do a discount, or here's my proposal for you, or maybe there's an additional service that I provide you to help you out in exchange for, some form of commitment that I can count on. So with that in mind, I would love to hear from Jack in terms of, well, what are the varying levels of commitment? Because if I'm Gary, it's like, well, I don't know. At the end of the day, dude, if there's a zombie apocalypse, whatever I just said is out the freaking window. I understand that. What I just don't want though is something that's willy-nilly, from my end.
Yeah. So, what you're talking about and what we've been talking about is kind of operational efficiencies. I also want to talk about what happens when there's a financial transaction or need, and that could be a refinance, that could be a sale, or just some sort of where they're doing due diligence, because this does become an important issue. But to answer your question as far as enforceability, it's easy to put together and sign an agreement that says, okay, we're going to ship you this and you're going to pay this. A lot of times the details are on the back side of that piece of paper of that purchase order that say these are additional terms and conditions. And it would include what happens if things don't go as planned, who has what rights, what are cure periods and things like that. And, the more sophisticated transactions may have a master agreement, and then you have statements of work or purchase orders that get attached to that. And those terms and conditions from the master agreement apply to each of the individual purchase orders or the statements of work. On the other side, the flip side of things, one of the things that we look at very carefully in a M&A type transaction is what is the longevity of the relationships? What are you locked into? And that applies to not only the cash flow, potential cash flow moving forward with customers, and the longevity of those relationships and how you have them locked in, but it also applies to, okay, at what point may that contract be renegotiated? At what point may it be adjusted for market as far as supply and demand, et cetera, so that you're going to have higher costs associated with that business. And so, and that also applies on the operational level too. I mean, you may want to lock in. I mean, I don't think that prices are going to come down on stuff anytime soon. So the better, if you can lock things down now for a longer period of time, that's better for you operationally. It's better for you fiscally in the event of an M&A transaction, because it's, as it says, there potentially purchase price discounts or adjustments based on those relationships. And I think that many times a little bit of arrogance comes into the room on either side. So from a seller side, that the supplier needs to sell. So we're their best game in town. So yeah, the buyer's going to be fine. Or the buyer says the same thing. Or the buyer says, well, we can easily get out of that contract. No big deal. Yeah, but do you want to, as the buyer and owner of the business moving forward? I mean, do you want to renegotiate that deal? It's also a point of, and this is a legal point, you have to very carefully look at those contracts for change of control or anti-assignment provisions in those documents. Going through that now, and this is in the context of a lease being assigned, and the seller says, oh yeah, no problem. They like us, they're going to like you. And I'm like, no, that's not what the document says. So we need to not be so cavalier about it. Similarly, in these contracts, there may be something that says change in control, but really it's an assignment. So you get looking into these documents more carefully, but really you're focusing in this instance and for this discussion on the longevity of those relationships for a number of issues. But it does have an impact operationally in both, and fiscally, meaning in a refinance, for example, bank's going to look at what are those relationships, those contracts that they are betting on that you're going to have revenue from, can those be taken away? So what is the credit risk that those banks or private investors are taking on, which would then govern maybe the interest rate or the other terms of the loan given to the business?
Yeah. So, I mean, the bottom line is, if you've got some type of contract, look at how you can make it tighter. If you've got no contract, look at how you can start to engineer getting one in place as a defensive, proactive move on your part. Thanks, Jack. The second one, look at customer profitability. I gotta tell you, in our world, this is the thing that I think our clients probably understand the least, that they could benefit the most from. And there's a fabulous book that goes into some pretty good analysis on this. It's the 80-20 principle, which basically, is the Pareto principle. We've all heard about the Pareto principle. It's that 80% of the effort, 20% of the effort yields 80% of the results, or whatever. There's not a linear in most situations. There's not a one-to-one correlation to anything. There's always a greater than one-to-one correlation between some stuff and a less than one-to-one correlation between other stuff. So, if you look at so the book's premise is how to do that analysis on your customer base, to determine which customers are really your most profitable that you should be putting the effort into, and looking at, well, what do you do with the rest of them? Because the rest of them are requiring resources. So if I use BGW as an example, BGW has roughly 4,000 some odd clients, and 800 of them account for 85% of our ratio or our revenue. So in that scenario, 20 some percent accounts for 85% of the revenue. So when our team comes up with like, well, Tommy complained, I hate to hear that. And I want to make it better. And at the same time, if Tommy is not in the 800, then I'm going to look real hard at why am I doing anything to change what we're doing, to cater to that. So on the customer side of the equation, I think once our clients actually dig into this problem of customer profitability, what they find is like, there's some customers, they're freaking paying, to do the work when they really look at the cost of serving that customer. Like they get all hung up like, oh my God, that'd be shedding 20% of 20% of my revenue. I can't do that. Yeah, but when you fully look at the costs associated with servicing that customer, it's actually costing you, -3% bottom line profit. So, really digging into the customer profitability and being prepared to make, because you can't cut customers without cutting the expenses associated with it, which a lot of times is labor, that gets associated with it, but, or redeploying it. So at BGW, we've got a common expression when people are like, yeah, but they're a good client, they've been paying us for years, and that's all true. And I want to help people, but if they're not willing to pay their fair share, it's like, it's not, why is it fair to anybody if, Gary's willing to pay me $1, but Jack's only willing to pay me 50 cents for the same service? Like, why is that going to be okay on a long-term basis? Like, I got to get Jack up to the $1 that Gary's paying, or I got to part company because there's other Garys out there that are willing to pay me the $1. Or Jack can go, I can save the expense, and I'm neutral from a profitability standpoint. In fact, it might even be even better because I'm now working with less clients making the same amount or more money. So my life's better. So that's really what this customer profitability piece is all about, is just having some real honest discussions with people around, look, dude, you're a big customer and I'm losing my ass on you. I want to be fair with you, but you got to help a brother out. Like, I don't think your plan is to, buy so much from me that I go out of business. Is it? So, and that could also apply, on the balance sheet side, that could apply to payment terms, 50% of your revenue and actually decent profit, but they've got you on 120-day terms. That could be killing you, from a cash flow perspective, if they're a high growth customer. So it's really digging in, looking at customer profitability and looking at who really am I making money off of, and how do I find more of them, and who really am I not making a lot of money off of, and how do I either get them to making money, or I gotta humanely move in a different direction, but again, this is good analysis to do regardless. And it's really the least understood, or like the last place people want to look, because most CEOs are sales oriented. They're not gross profit or bottom line oriented. They say they are, but they're really sales oriented. And they don't look at this, but yet it's insanely valuable regardless, and critical if you're about to face sales downturn.
Yeah. So every turnaround situation that I've been involved in personally, or with people that I've coached, in that the issue has been big customers, big clients that they're afraid to look under the hood because they represent a big percentage of their income and they don't want to look there. And I remember we had the vice chairman of Walmart that was in our private equity group, and he said, yeah, be careful. You know, the good news is you landed Walmart. The bad news is you're going to be out of business because you landed Walmart. And that's a guy who was the treasurer of Walmart saying that. You have to understand that, and it seems like it's the big ones that we have a tough time doing. And a really simple thing that you can do is then tier your big customers. And with one company, we tiered them into 4 tiers. And the top 2 tiers were 80% of our client base, you know. And developing, one other thing that I'd say is having detailed and locked in contracts is important. That's a good thing, but it will never supplant the need for building strong relationships with people, where you can actually pick up the phone and get something done versus by the letter of the law based on the stickler and the niddles and the gnats of the contract. So we've got a chat. Hold on here. Let's see what we got. Okay, Derek, thanks for weighing in on this. Great point. To make matters worse, I've heard business owners essentially say they will address the loss with more volume. Yeah.
No, we're losing money. We'll make it up on volume. I mean, the joke there really is, because if we have more sales, it'll absorb more of our fixed overhead. That's sort of like we're going to win the work at a discount. We'll gradually increase prices. It never freaking works, and neither does the volume answer. You know, in extremely limited circumstances, volume solves a fixed cost problem, but it's rare that you can actually execute on that, because then you got to discount your price to increase the volume, which just further compounds your customer profitability standpoint. It's a great point, Derek. Do the hard work. You know, it's not like you need to do it often, but it's sort of like, I don't know. I mean, we all know that I love the ostrich head in the sand. It's like, well, how much longer do you want to keep the head in the sand versus, hey, I'm going to look around and say, God, I don't want to look there. You know, get the head out of the sand and understand where you're really making money.
So
go ahead.
I'd say a couple of thoughts on that. It is tough to fire a customer and fire a client, but sometimes you just have to do it because it's just not the right fit anymore for whatever reason. You know, and we've had, and we try to be honest. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes it is, you know, here are some people that might be a better fit. So for example, a company that has a lot of collections for, you know, and our firm is not built efficiently to be a collections law firm to collect debts. And so, you know, and we'll do it, but when it becomes kind of more often for a client, it's just not efficient. So it's not necessarily that we're firing the client, but we're saying maybe you should take this legal work elsewhere where they will bill you on a contingency or success fee basis. I think the other is that other comment is that, you know, it's a lot of times when you're doing a comparative analysis between profit or revenue, expenses, profitability, et cetera, and you're doing a profitability analysis, it's easy to look with blinders on and say, okay, and look at the direct, obviously you're going to look at the revenue, but then look at the direct costs. So this person is 100% assigned to this account. What about the person that is 50% assigned to that account? So in my world, so if you have maybe 4 paralegals that are assigned to do certain work and for a specific client, and then, you know, what is the revenue related to that? But then when you start paying the partners and the associates and the paralegals, et cetera, you know, what really is, I mean, the revenue looks fantastic, but, and then if you were just to assign the direct costs to that to come up with that, and that was your profitability analysis, that's not going to be accurate. So you need to be a little more eye opened into, you know, what does it take to make that dollar? Marginal costs and costs that are not necessarily associated 100% with that dollar, but are marginally associated with that. So, and that just becomes tough. Another example would be in doing analysis recently, or seeing this analysis done was, and I don't know how, I really don't know how Amazon does it. And it is basically taking a company that's trying to be like Amazon and with fulfillment. And so, you know, there was a time not so recent, but that Amazon people were showing up at our doors several times a day, and it was a different person. Sometimes it was the same person later on in the day. But I mean, it's just, this on-demand ordering and fulfillment that happens versus saying, okay, we're going to wait to the end of the day, see where the orders are. Kind of like if you get furniture delivered, they wait until the day before to decide what route they're going to go on, right? So it's kind of like doing that, which is waiting to see what you got, put the max into that truck that you can in an efficient geography, and then deliver those things. And so, like I said, encountered a company that just was fulfilling orders with and putting trucks out there that may be a quarter filled, a fifth filled, or using these large trucks to deliver small items. Well, get smaller Sprinter trucks or whatever it may be. So those kind of things. And, we may talk about that in more detail, but, talk about, if a customer, that's their expectation, that's what you're doing, then it may be time for them to do something differently if it's costing you a lot to fulfill those orders or fulfill the expectations of that client or customer.
One more thing that I'll bring up before we move to the next topic, and that is, it's something that I see all the time with clients and companies. They have not really nailed down their customer persona, like their ideal customer. Oh, and especially when you're starting out, like you'll take money from anywhere, but the more narrow you define and understand who your ideal customer is, the better you can quickly say no on the upfront side. And you don't have to leave them and say there's no room at the end. You can also send them to somebody that you trust that is aligned with that size of company or that expertise or that nuance that is outside of your ideal customer persona. And if you don't know how to do that, get somebody, ping us. We've done that a lot, but find somebody that can help you deal with your customer persona. And all you really got to do is get your top management team and say, who are the people that we like, that say please and thank you, that pay us on time, that refer us to others. That's pretty simple. But look at that, and then look honestly at the rest of your client base and say, where do they fit? Can they change? Some of them can, but you have to have the conversation with them. So anyway, diversification with the storm clouds coming out helps. And if you know who you're targeting, even better. So next.
Yeah, so the next bullets are really tied hand in hand, which is just really looking at the cost structure. And what you're looking for here is just comparing each P&L account year on year, or some time period relative to some time period, and just trying to ask the question, why did it go up? Like, can I explain why it went up? And was that one time, or was that something that's permanent in terms of why it went up? That's the first bullet here, or the first test. And a lot of times it's like our health insurance bill. We added more employees, of course it would go up. The second thing that you're going to want to look at, keeping the health insurance theme though, is that, ideally, you can't always control for this, but ideally your expense categories shouldn't go up at a higher rate than your sales growth. So if my sales go up by 5%, not surprised my health insurance goes up by 5%. I don't like it, but I'm not surprised. However, sales go up 5%, health insurance goes up 40%. All of a sudden, I need to start asking some questions around what are we doing with this expense? Like, how can we control for it? Do we need to shop it around? Come up with a different plan? Like, do we need to cut somewhere else because we're committed to this expense level? So that's analysis number 2. So then you get into the second big bullet point, which is compare ratios. Again, this is just good practice, but it's the great equalizer into the thing that we've all heard as business owners and management you know, hey, Gary, I need you to do blah, blah. Oh, yeah, too busy. I need more people. Like for me to be able to do that, I just gotta hire like 20 more people. You know, no way. Whatever. It's like your gut, you're like, well, geez, I trust Gary, you know, but my gut, the great equalizer is ratios. In other words, if last year $1 in salary expense produced $2 in gross profit, I want you to explain to me why now it takes $1.50 in salary expense to produce $2 in gross profit. That should not be happening. Like I can accept that everything's going to go up, but they should be going up at the same rate. So if we've been able to get $1 to produce $2, I want you to explain to me why $1 can't still continue to produce $2. Better freaking yet, Gary, I want you to tell me how to get to 75 cents produces $2. You know, that's really what you want more. I want it to be less. Yes. So how do we get it? How do we get it lower? But it's really looking at those ratios of $1 of this equals how much in gross profit dollars. And if you're starting to see those numbers fluctuate in a negative direction, you know, that's a sign. At the same time, you know, it's a way of validating Gary's concern. You know, like if I've historically always been at $1, you know, produces $2, and we've all been pretty happy with that, you know, hitting our bottom line target after we flow through with it, customer profitability, all good. And I'm like, all right, but I'm going to be Ebenezer Scrooge, you know, hey, Gary, you know, just got this order. I'm going to need 20 people for that. It's like, go to hell. I mean, this is going to prove out maybe Gary's team is at his breaking point, you know, objectively, not subjectively. But again, these are good practices you should be doing anyway. But I found that this one, above all else, allows me to have an objective conversation with the team about busyness. And, you know, there's only one of two answers. Either A, Gary is not busy, even though he says he is, or B, Gary is busy, but default back to the first bullet, which is my customers just aren't profitable. You know, so I'm asking Gary to do the same work that he could be getting $1 for, but for 50 cents. But because I'm measuring this ratio, I'm like, Gary, you know, you should be able to do more, because I'm looking at, well, I mean, if I'm asking him to do a bunch of work on some low profitability customers, like at some point, like the time's the time, you know, so that's the only other place that it could be, is that you know, I know that Gary's efficient, but he's working on some low profitability customers when he could be working on high profitability customers, or Gary's not as busy as Gary thinks he is. Gary and I never had that conversation. Just kidding.
And I would say,
we're both busy.
Yeah.
and I would say, to tag on to that, and you guys may say, yeah, no, Jack, you're wrong. No way. No, NFW, but I think that it's okay to have dips in those ratios in anticipation of the curve, the slope of the curve going higher, faster. And what I mean by that is, and I guess I should do it this way because it's inverted, right? Is an investment in an upgrade in technology, a new forklift or something along those lines, that, you know, once you make that investment and pay for that machinery, that if you were to compare and split that cost among, you know, the cost to produce, that those ratios are going to dip. But because of having that new piece of machinery or that upgrade, that at, you know, within a few months that you're, or even immediately, more product is going out the door. Okay. And I know we talked about not trying to over revenue things, but this is really kind of, I think, a little different, which is, you know, you're able to fulfill orders more quickly, whatever it may be. For some reason, I'm on a manufacturing kick today, but it applies to service industries as well, meaning making the expense, the investment that would have a short-term effect on those ratios that Adam's been talking about, But in the long term, again, that slope or the points of the slope are increasing higher on the ratios if you hadn't made that investment. So instead of like this, it's like this, is the way I would envision it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So a little bit of a dip even, but it accelerates the slope of the curve in the future. Like in our world, you know, the case for that, it's funny, the meeting's coming up at 3 o'clock. I'm sure that Jack has never had these meetings at Shoemaker, but it's really around, you know, what should our administrative team do versus the folks that are, you know, out servicing the clients directly, you know, in a direct capacity. It's like, my answer is that the people that are serving in a direct capacity shouldn't be doing anything but tax planning, tax consulting, you know, financial statements, meeting with clients, advising them. They shouldn't be like chasing signatures, you know, on stuff. Now I could have an administrative person that sends the email on my behalf, so it's responded to chase Jack for a signature, but I should not be like worried with that. Well, that requires hiring administrative people to be able to do that. So excuse my ratio, but if that frees up my time, that should lead to revenue growth or future efficiency or something. Those are all good. It's when I can't have a story that it's bad.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Right. So Jack's never had that conversation about more paralegals, more attorneys, more administrative people, right?
There's people always that are like, okay, more. And also, like I said, on the technology side of things, why do we need to spend money on that? But then it's funny, the people who are naysayers are the ones that are embracing it. Like, oh, this is so cool. I can do this way, you know, and it's so much more efficient. And yeah. And so, and I say this kind of quietly because I think I see technology as reducing the number of admins you may need, because the automation, so the voice recognition, the ability for me to dictate my timesheets, my time into the computer very accurately, versus having, you know, in prior decades, writing on a piece of paper and handing a sheet to a legal assistant to be doing that. But the reality is that she's not doing that, so she's doing other stuff. And so, yeah, it's evolved. It hasn't made them obsolete in any, you know, in any way. Well, I should say in any way, not obsolete. It's changed what they're doing on a daily basis. But to your point is, they're doing stuff that is administrative and, you know, taking some of that away from me, because it is easier to talk into a machine rather than sit there and write. Even though I write very messy and shorthand, but it's still faster to talk into a machine, and a machine that learns what I'm saying and has a legal dictionary. So it interprets it. Like, for example, most dictation devices would interpret the term franchisor with franchise and then the word or instead of putting or as the suffix of that word. So stuff like that. And that's what I'm talking about, the investments, that I think we've been fortunate and wise, conservative. I mean, we don't jump on every new piece of technology that is thrown at us that is like the new thing that, you know, all the law firms are doing, which is not true in most cases. So I'm sure same thing for you guys. You guys are hit up with, this is the latest and greatest in billing and, you know, customer relation management and all those things. And so sometimes it is worth to make those investments.
Yeah, understanding what the ROI potential is and then holding yourself accountable to that. I mean, even at Bank of America, you know, at one point I had almost a $40 million budget that I was managing, and our expectation was $2 back for $1 invested. Well, that's hard when you're doing brand building stuff like that too. So we would have to do a mix to where we knew that direct mail, we had a 98% failure rate, but the 2% that hit gave us more than a 2-to-1 ROI to pay for some of these other things. So the ratios are important. The data doesn't lie, and understanding, are we doing an investment spend, or are we just kind of closing our eyes and hoping that it's good?
Yeah, that's right. And then, really the last item that was on the list, it's funny, I was having a conversation before this with one of my colleagues, talking about budgeting, and he just asked questions like, well, how many of your clients actually budget? And I'm like, very few, like, unfortunately, very few. So the last point here is, it said a sales target, but not a budget. So last point here is, actually, put on your things to do, doing a budget, and really you ought to be starting with, your revenue now. And then if you go through these exercises, you can start building out the expense budget to support that revenue to where you've got something ready to lock and load, which is going to help you out in terms of determining, well, how many people do we need to hire, or do we have the right labor force? If we need to start looking at expense reductions, how do we bake that into our plan, for next year, so we can start making those moves, now, and doing the research now. And that really comes through, budgeting out what you think you're going to do next year. And you really need to start that, I found, sooner rather than later.
One of the biggest dangers or things that I see replicated in businesses, I mean, you made the comment that very few clients do budgeting. And I think there are also a group of that think they're doing budgeting, but really what they're doing is they're taking this year's expenses and saying, we're probably going to do the same next year. So let's just add 10% to that. And that's their new number. And that's how they come up with their pro forma and their budget. And they really don't take into account extraordinary, and I mean, extraordinary, not extraordinary, meaning things that are not normal course of business on the expense side, but also on the revenue side. I mean, if there was, a kind of a home run, and for example, let's say that there was, and we take very few things on contingency, but sometimes that turns out to bode well for the firm. But sometimes it doesn't. I mean, sometimes, we have to write off things that don't turn out the way that we would have liked them to on a contingency. That's why we don't take many of them. But, it is maybe an example would be we take on an IP portfolio, copyrights, trademarks, patents. And so, and then they want to pursue a bunch of patents that they were keeping quiet. Well, that's a lot of work up front. Yes, a lot of revenue expenses, but is that going to be the same next year? Probably not, because you will have, unless they have, even the same amount of patents to file, et cetera. But, so just be mindful of the anomalous data points, both on the revenue and the expense side when putting together those budgets and the pro formas for the following year. Definitely again, going back to transactions, whether it's, a loan, whether it's an investor, whether it's a refinance, they're going to want to look at and see, what those things are, and have you accounted for it, and relatedly seasonality too. I mean, seasonality kind of becomes the norm after a few seasons, meaning years of it, and it just becomes kind of baked into it. But if it is true that this past Christmas, not as much money was spent, you got to deal with that. And as far as doing your pro formas and everything else. So just be mindful and not say same as before, because most cases that's not going to be the case.
So a couple things as we're getting ready to wind down. I just heard Adam's stomach growling, looking for some barbecue.
Been starving myself all day in anticipation of this.
So we've got an all hands meeting in person. We're excited to have that again in person today. We do that on a monthly basis, and so it's good to have everybody back in person. But with regard to, if anybody is new on this and did not get this access to this particular worksheet that we've been talking about here today, that we dealt with a couple of weeks ago on balance sheet as well, let me know, send me an email, and I'll get you access to the vault for a kind of a temporary trial. If you're not a client of ours, if you are a client, you should have a business client, you should have access to this. If you don't, let me know. GFREY at trustbgw.com. Also, in the vault, we have a discussion thread on a lot of this topic on recession proofing your business. And so a couple things that Adam and I have kind of gone back and forth about is doing some simple thoughts on creating an effective budget. I think a lot of times people overcomplicate it. And so all of a sudden they're like, well, that never worked. What can you do to keep it simple and actionable and effective, but also some notes and thoughts on the ratios. So does that cover that?
Yep.
All right, cool. Jack, any thoughts for you before we say adieu?
I think this is great that we're going through this and getting, I don't know of any other time where I've gone through or participated or viewed kind of the marrying up of going through, these items from an accounting financial perspective and a legal perspective. So I appreciate the opportunity to share these things, because a lot of times it is focus on one thing and not the other until you get very later on in the process, meaning there's a need, as I said, a financial or operational challenge. And so I think this is good that we're going through this, and, we'll continue to go through. It's kind of like we're telling war stories in the background without revealing the names, right? And so it's kind of like, okay, when we see these things, each of these things, just so you know, for those that are watching, we see these things, and I think that each of us can put client names into each of those boxes as to, okay, who did and who didn't do those things properly. So, real world experiences. So, yeah, hopefully we can help guide people in the right direction on some of these things.
Yeah, right on. Anybody that came on late, we will put this up on the BGW CPA YouTube channel later on this afternoon after we get done eating some barbecue and have our meeting. So we'll do that later on this afternoon, and I will miss all of you guys next week because I'm at a board meeting in the great state of Ohio. So that was a good time to visit Ohio, not January. So anyway, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate you, and have a great day and rest of the week. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. See you guys. Thanks, sir.